Hi. This week, we're going to be talking about Far From Heaven, a movie directed by Todd Haynes in 2002. I'm Mars, and I use they, them
I'm
pronouns.
Melanie, and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Kalani, and I use any pronouns.
I'm Evelyn, and I use she, her pronouns. So, as Mars said, this week we're going to be discussing the movie Far From Heaven, directed by Todd Haynes. And to just give a brief overview of the movie, Far From Heaven revolves around a suburban housewife dealing with severe life changes, causing her family to be gossiped about around town, as well as causing her to question race and sexuality within her community. So, just to start it off, we're discussing Far From Heaven in terms of melodrama. So one of the main elements of melodrama I know we discussed in class is music. Something that I immediately noticed about the music, I kind of thought it was funny in a sense, because I wrote down in my notes when we were watching it, I was like, the music is giving like Disney movie or like Little House on the Prairie, if you guys know that show, like those kind of vibes.
Yeah.
Of just like very like like that kind of stuff, like Disney music, when it was like the family just like in their home, because they're like a nuclear family kind of like operating, but the music would change like when they were outside of when the main character Kathy was outside of the police station going to like pick up her husband. It was like kind of foreboding music, but it was like super like exaggerated kind of, if that makes sense. So yeah,
I also noticed really exaggerated music. It was actually the scene where Frank was following those two guys to the gay club, and it was like, what's he gonna do to those guys? And then it's like, oh, he's gay. But the music definitely hinted at something going down.
Yeah. I also noticed that like during the like opening sequence, which was so like how they had like the opening sequence where they had all the credits at the beginning, I was so like, this is so like old like Disney movie that you'd watch as a kid. Like I love that. But it had this like super, it was almost like an overture type of thing. It was just like different like types of music, and there were like horns and piano and stuff, and then they had like the same music at the end, like after the train scene. It was like the same like powerful music, and I was like, oh, that's fun. They're like wrapping it up.
Yeah, bring it back.
I'm excited to talk about the train scene, but we'll save it for later.
But no, because I feel like just in addition to what we were saying about music, like the music kind of like it basically tells you what's going to happen before it happens. Like it'll show the outside of like a building, and it'll be like creepy, not like creepy, but like, you know, like intense music playing. And you're like, oh, something is obviously going to happen that's like scary or like a big deal like to the plot. So I feel like in that way, that's kind of how like the music gave to the film. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any more comments about music, but those were like my main takeaways. I feel like
I noticed one other thing with just when Frank came back into the office after, I don't know, I think it was right after his wife caught him like the night before cheating in his office, and like he was walking through and everyone was like, good morning, Frank, hey Frank, and he was like saying hi back, but the music was like very like foreboding and just like kind of like tense and like creepy, so like you knew that in his head he was not having a good morning.
And I'm guessing that before, I didn't write this down, so I can't recall exactly, but that scene was definitely in parallel to the one before, when he was walking down the hallway and he was like, what a lovely dress, oh, you're so charming, like all that stuff. So there was probably brighter music. I don't know if you guys can remember, but
there was.
Definitely.
And I mean, also in regards to music, but also to kind of segue just like in general with the film, I feel like we were saying, the music is like super exaggerated. Like it's very much like, this is what's going to happen. And I feel like everything within the film was like very exaggerated in my opinion, just like the way that they were reacting to things, the way they were acting and everything, which I felt like kind of to tie it into like the themes of the film, like with race and everything. It was kind of like this exaggerated way of going about like dealing with these issues, and it was almost like comical in a sense, because it was like, oh my god, this is like so extra kind of, but at the same time it kind of was like telling of how like stupid, I guess, like society looks when they are dealing with race, if that makes sense. Like I feel like the exaggeratedness of it was almost like more true than it was like just for the film. Like it made it out to be, it was almost like making fun of it in a way, if that makes sense. I don't know if you guys have comments on that, but
Off of that, Evelyn, that made me want to bring up the whole thing about like, here's to being the only one. That was like their little thing. Let me know how, if I'm in the wrong here, but that kind of felt, I don't know, like it just kind of felt not, because, okay, obviously when Raymond's the only one in the room, it's because everyone else in the room is racist and he's oppressed. But like, him bringing her to it, and the movie was like, this is the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, no. I was like,
Yeah.
no, she's fine. She's gonna be fine. Like, she's a white woman, upper class. Like, she is going to be okay. But she was like, Raymond. I was like, what? I was a little confused about what they were trying.
I was like, because they were like, oh, like, why did you bring a white lady here? And she was like, oh my God, we should leave. I don't belong here.
Yeah, that was a little odd.
Like you said, I do get what they were trying to do there, and like it was kind of like a nice moment, but it was also like I felt like the whole time there were like things like that, and like her being like, oh, I've been like with the NAACP for a long time, and like, oh, like just by the way, like I think that Black people are people. Like it's probably a point where I think that Black people deserve rights.
There were a few points where she was just like, yeah, Black people are deserving of rights, and then Raymond was like, cool, and then like
it's like,
I don't know,
like the bare minimum.
I feel like that's like
the 50s.
Yeah, I feel like the like modern equivalent of that is like when people would be like, no, like I'm not racist, like I voted for Obama, like I like Black people, like that's what that really reminded me of, which reminded me of Get Out too. How the dad in Get Out was like, I would have voted for Obama a third time. It was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like why
it's
is
also
that?
like it,
like why did you share that?
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Also, I don't know if anyone else wanted to say something, but also kind of what you were saying, Melanie, just like when you brought that whole thing up, like I wrote in my notes when we were watching, I was just like, oh, like poor white woman has to deal with like like finally realizing that there's like oppression in the world, and like other people like are going through these things, and it's like she's like, it's so hard to deal with the fact that like people don't like you because you're Black. It's like you don't actually have to deal with that. It's actually like his thing that he has to deal with, you know what I mean? It's like it's just it's such a like white person thing to do, to be like, oh my God, I can't believe that like you're oppressed, like I don't think you should be. And it's like, okay, cool, like you're not helping by, you know, just saying that like you believe we should all have like equal rights or whatever. But yeah,
it's also the way that like anytime anyone was like, oh, so you like support Black people, she was like, what? No, never. And it's like, oh, you've been seen with Raymond. She's like, no, I haven't. She's like gaslighting them all. She's like, y'all are crazy.
Yeah.
Also off of that, I thought it was interesting.
I support Black people, but not when my friends are around. I was like, okay.
Also off of that, I thought it was not interesting.
It wasn't impactful either.
No.
It
was something you noticed.
It was something I noticed is when Kathy asked Sybil to sign the I don't know if it was the NAACP, but I know it was some Black organization, and she was like, oh, I have to go, and then had Sybil sign it for her, which just kind of also showed that like, are these your values if you're not following through? And
and like to bring it back to melodrama, and like an aspect of that is the exaggerated acting, like just looking at Sybil's face, like after Kathy walks away and Sybil like takes the thing to sign it, she's like she's very pissed off, which I think was something I noticed for sure.
Yeah, and also going off like the elements of melodrama, something else that I know we talked about is how like the plot is like driving the characters in a melodrama, correct? Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like, not to get too like metaphorical, but like I kind of feel like just the whole concept of like, oh, the plot is driving the characters is kind of like similar or like a parallel to like how racism works like in real life, because it's one of those things where it's like I feel like because of like racist society, a lot of the time people's lives, like specifically people of color, like Black people, their lives are kind of like almost driven for them. Like the choices that they make a lot of the time isn't actually going to like impact where they end up because of like racist society, if that kind of makes sense. And I don't know, that's just kind of something I was thinking about while we were watching it. Like I feel like they kind of intertwine in that way. It's like an interesting, or not interesting, it's there and it's there and it's proud. So yeah.
You need to like look up synonyms and like write them all down.
Yeah. And going off the point of like how plot is driving character, I feel like there was so much like coincidence in this movie. Like the way that like the movie needs like Raymond and Kathy to meet. So Raymond is just suddenly like the son of this like gardener that I guess they had. Like the gardener wasn't even introduced until Raymond was introduced. And it was just like, oh, like there's a random man in my backyard. And then like there were other scenes where it was just like, this is just super random, but it's gonna happen because we need it too. So that was something that I noticed was very like melodramatic. I was like, all right.
And also the fact that it like kind of didn't really have an ending, or it didn't really like close up extremely nicely. It was just like,
dude, the ending of it made like I laughed because like when we talked about unrealisticness in melodramas and how they're just not authentic to real life, and just like imagine like in real life saying goodbye to someone, and instead of him being shocked that she was there, it was more like she's here, and then all they did was like that would never happen ever. That would never ever happen.
Also the fact,
and I just thought it was
like,
so funny.
Yeah, and they had just had a conversation where he was like, all right, like I know that we have a connection, but like you need to leave me alone because this is gonna be bad for both of us. And then she shows up at the train station. He's like,
she pulls up with her kids. She's like, stay in the car.
She leaves the kids in the car. She's like, I'll be back in a minute. I was like, girl, like what?
She doesn't have a husband anymore to watch them, so she had to take them with her, I guess.
Okay, oh my god, don't even get me started.
Speaking of,
don't get me started on Frank.
Frank is a mess. But also the way that he just got to like, okay, I'm just gonna leave my family and like go follow
so
whatever.
Easy.
Like I can do that and I'm not bothered and like bye.
She was literally like so you want a divorce? Like she through the whole thing, I did have admiration towards her, despite her being problematic in some ways. Just the fact that like she was able to consistently pursue and be there for her children and keep together this household and put on a smile and just like I did have admiration for her.
Of that because before Frank left her, he was so rude to her at all times. If he was talking to her, he was yelling at her or being rude, and she would always try to say something nice or like literally just have a conversation with him, and he would either ignore her or yell or hit her. I was like, you need to leave him.
So something I want to bring up is the conversation in the dining room. I think it was a dining room that they had when he was like, do you realize what this could do to my reputation that I've been building for 8 years?
Oh my God.
Just completely ignoring what he had just done to her and broken her heart. And then also he throws away that reputation a month later. So it's like,
that
were you mad at her because it was race? I think so.
Definitely.
No, that whole his character, I was like trying desperately to like feel any sort of like ounce of sympathy for him, because I was like, oh, this is like a difficult thing to like go through in this time period. I literally could not, because especially that scene that you brought up, Melanie, when they were in the dining room and he was like, how could you hang out with a Black guy? Like, this is gonna ruin our reputation. I was like, you're gay and it's the 50s, so I don't really know why you're yelling at her. Like anything that, like, do you know what I mean? Like he was saying like, oh, this thing that you did like could completely ruin our reputation, but obviously like we know from everything that was going on in the movie, like anything that he does could also. And like you were just saying, like a month later he just like completely, it was such a weird switch. Like he went from being like, we can't destroy a reputation to like all of a sudden being like, oh, I'm gonna go off. And also like he got to abandon being a father and everything because he's a man and like whatever. That was another whole thing. But sorry, you go. What you're gonna say?
Probably symbolic of his like accepting his sexuality and moving on. Not to defend Frank, but the fact that he was like, our reputation, I can't believe you would do this. One, just straight up being racist. Two, like moving on from being like, I care so much about my reputation and I would do anything to keep it, to then being like, okay, it's in my best interest, it's in my family's best interest for me to be who I am. I think that was like, although maybe I'm reading too far into it. I know that we're not supposed to get that much character development in melodrama, but I did see that like as sort of a like, hey, at least he won't ruin her life anymore.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think that it's like important.
Also, oh yeah.
No, sorry, you say what you were gonna say.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think that was an important like plot point, and I agree with you that I think it's better for him to like be gone and be true to himself than be in the family like suffering and like making everybody else suffer. I just think it's awful that he's allowed to just like leave and like now she has to like kind of pick up the pieces, and like he was making no effort to be like, so like the children, how is that going to work? I mean, obviously we saw very little of that time period like when he left, but I don't know, that just rubbed me the wrong way. But I agree with you in what you said. So
yeah. And also like, oh sorry, also when Kathy was talking to Eleanor, like something that was weird was like as we were talking about like, oh, like it's fine for him to like go off even though like being gay in the 50s is like just as bad, almost like with the racism. Well, like it's not just as bad, but like with reputation on the line. But when she was talking to Eleanor, when she was like, oh yeah, so like my husband's gay, that's why I'm alone now, and Eleanor was like, oh damn, that sucks. And then Kathy was like, yeah, and sometimes I think about Raymond. She's like, whoa, hold on, we can't be friends. I was like, oh,
so telling. I loved that they had like, it was like, I'm so glad you're always here for me. Oh, I'm always gonna be there for you. And then immediately she's like, I'm leaving. I can't believe you just said that. I need time to think. Like,
and this might be like delving too much into it, but it also may just be that women during the 50s, there was such a strong stereotype on them to be exactly pristine, whatever, household and women in the kitchen, whole stereotype. And a lot of them really wanted to fit that stereotype, including Kathy. And so when Eleanor, yeah, that's her name, was being like internalized sexism towards Kathy, like when she said that, because it's like, oh, that was Frank's fault. Frank is gay, not you. And then Kathy is like, I like a black man. And she's like, that's not stereotypical for a woman. And so that's
this especially seeing inside the office and just like the housewives really made me think. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Mad Men. That is a really good show with like very similar themes to this movie. Just of like you were saying, Melanie, women having to live up to certain stereotypes in the 50s that were extremely cookie cutter, that literally a whole person could not fit into that stereotype, never mind all of the women in the 50s. So yeah,
definitely. Also, kind of another detail, I don't know if you guys noticed this, or if, I mean, I don't know if this is like totally 100%, but I noticed that most of the times, if not all, because I'm not entirely sure, that Kathy was interacting with Frank, like when they would fight or when they would just talk, she was always wearing red or like a warm color. I noticed, I don't know if this is always true, but at least for like the last like 2/3 of the movie, I would say, because that's when I started like noticing it and paying attention to it. I just noticed that she was always wearing like warm tones when she was talking to him, and when she was with Raymond, she was wearing a lot of cool toned colors. Like she had that purple scarf, and she was wearing like green.
Okay.
I don't know if that, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I noticed something with colors too. I noticed like purple and blue lighting versus like yellow and orange lighting being used a lot in certain situations. For example, at the art exhibition when she first started talking to Raymond, there was like both orange and blue lighting coming through the window. And I think that blue was used as like I guess like a non-safe area, because I noticed like green, orange, and yellow, for example, being used in the gay bar and like in the bar that was like predominantly black. And then like outside would be like blue or purple. I just noticed that that was a really common theme of like lighting. And I know that that is not melodrama, but I wanted to bring it up because I noticed it and I really like that.
Yeah.
No,
and I know
yeah.
when she was with Frank at the like resort thing, she had like a really fancy blue dress on. So maybe it was like, oh, she's not as safe as she thinks she is in this relationship. Because then he made eye contact with a kid and fell in love with him.
Falling in love on vacation with your wife, come on.
And that's supposed to be
Falling
like
in love.
this next step in your relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also with clearly,
This is
I
kind
mean,
of
he looked
switching-
underage to me. Sorry, I just completely no. You
So
guys
young.
Okay. This is kind of switching subjects, but something I do want to talk about is Raymond's daughter, Sarah, and that whole the 3 little punk children that were awful, and just like about that whole subject.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that, I feel like it was kind of a combination of like, you know what it felt like? I don't know if you guys have seen like the original It movies, but
original.
Well, I mean, even somewhat in the newer ones, but like there's this, like the bullies are always like throwing rocks at the kids and like severely hurting them to like the point where it's like you could kill these kids. Like I think it was almost trying to imitate like the way that kids in movies and maybe in real life in like the 50s, I don't really know, but like they were just so much more violent than like I feel like if you're just like a bully in like today's like movies, it's gonna just be like name calling and maybe there's a punch, but it's like this was like they almost killed her.
Yeah, I do think that that is very important, because back then white people literally thought that Black people were less than human, literally thought, and there are still some medical professionals that fucking think this, I'm so sorry, that they have a lower pain tolerance than white people, which is fucking not true. I'm sorry, I keep swearing. But that whole scene, I just kept thinking like, they literally don't see her as a person. They see her as this like thing that's invading their like white perfect society, and that they need to throw rocks at her.
Yeah, and kind of off of that, that's something I don't think Kathy understood, because when she went to visit Raymond and was like, oh, I'm like kind of admitting her love for him, he was like, well, my daughter just got hate crime and I really care about her, so we're moving. And she was like, why? Like she just didn't.
She was
like she
like, oh, I'll come with, and he was like, no.
But yeah, I don't think she fully understood that. She was like,
I don't think she did
that's
either.
such a horrible thing.
Yeah, she was like, I'll come with you. They won't know us there. Like it would all be better. But Raymond knew that racism is everywhere and it would definitely follow them there. And there would be no way of knowing how it would be there.
Also the fact that like, I mean, obviously it was because the little girl was Black, but on top of that, it was kind of Kathy's fault, because during that scene when they were throwing the rocks at her, they kept being like, oh, daddy's girl, like, oh, your daddy, like, oh, now he has a white girlfriend. Like it was Kathy's fault that this like happened to her. Because the first time that they met Sarah, like those little boys, they just like walked past her and they like were like mean, but they didn't do anything. But then like when everyone got the news that it was like Raymond and Kathy, then they like targeted her.
For sure.
Also, I feel like kind of going off of this, like just the whole Kathy being oblivious to like everything that Raymond and his daughter have to go through. I feel like a big theme that I kind of think maybe was present is just like the whole concept of like in so many like white people's minds, as well as like in movies in general, like Black people are always kind of just like background to white people's stories. Like it's like Raymond was just kind of like this background piece to like Kathy's larger character arc kind of I mean, literally it's a movie, so like obviously there's like main characters, and but I mean also just like if it was real, like the fact that I don't know, like it just felt like to me like her interest in him wasn't like super genuine, and it was kind of just like, I'm going through this really hard thing, and like almost like a not like a rebelling thing, but just somebody to lean on. Oh, this guy's nice to me. Like it doesn't really, in the long run, the racism that he's experiencing because of her isn't going to affect her, if that makes sense. And I don't know, I just feel like that's like kind of, that's also like a huge thing in cinema, like in the 50s and, you know, before, I mean, even still now, just the fact that white people are kind of always at the forefront and black people are always kind of in the back, just like being little side characters to like their stories. And that's kind of, I feel like how a lot of white people view people of color, like in their lives, kind of, if that makes sense. I don't know. That's just a thought I was having.
I like that you said that, oh, well, I forget exactly what you said now, but just like the idea that, just that she'll never understand or feel the racism that he has to endure because of her. Like the whole, everyone, you saw everyone in that art exhibition staring at him. Every single person in there was staring at him. And then it became, they were all staring at her because she associated with him. Like that's how powerful the racism is. And she will never know what it's like to fully experience that and to experience it her whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also, like, as you were saying with like, oh, he was there for her like bigger character arc or whatever. It in the sense of like melodrama, it kind of like, to me, it was definitely like the forbidden romance trope, but like that's such a weird trope to have when it's like, oh, the forbidden romance is like racism, because it's like forbidden romance is so like, oh, like this is sad and there's something holding us back, but it's not like racism.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That felt a little like cheesy.
An ambitious goal for that. For
yeah.
The makers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before fit check? We're pushing 26 minutes, so.
I think we should do fit check.
I think we should.
There's a lot of good fits.
Dude,
yes.
I like.
You guys go first. I have a lot written down. I'll just take the slack, whichever one you guys can say.
I think my overall favorite, well, first fit check. I think my overall, like, I don't know, it's definitely the one that caught my eye most and like reminded me that fit check was a thing. I was like, oh yes, like it was her outfit at the art gallery, and it was like the green velvet with like the skirt that had like a bunch of different like pastel stripes on it. She just looked so cute. And I also really liked her when they were in Miami and she was like at the pool, her little like pool lounge, like little collared bathing suit. I don't know, it was made out of like cotton, so maybe not bathing suit, but it was really cute. And I was like, yes. But I think those were like my two fit checks.
Okay, fit check. One of like maybe my all-time favorite was literally her first outfit that we ever see her in, which is she had like a blue dress on. You couldn't really see it, but the main thing was like she had this green coat that sort of like laid on her dress, which was really pretty. And then she had orange scarf and red gloves with the green coat. Like the contrast was so pretty. And I was like, she looks so good. And then my second one is when she was having like the brunch with the ladies. She had like the reddish orange dress, and I loved it. It was so beautiful.
Okay, I'll go. Fit check. So my fit check is actually Eleanor, not Kathy. Going against the grain here, but Eleanor's like dress that she wore to the party when Frank got really drunk and annoying, like when she was wearing that like blue green kind of, I don't know if you guys remember, but it's like long and it was like ruched kind of. I thought that was really pretty. Also kind of similar to what I was saying before about like colors. I noticed also that I feel like Eleanor was dressed in mostly cool tones like throughout the film. I don't know if that like has any meaning whatsoever, but I really liked a lot of her outfits as well. So yeah.
Okay, fit check. I really liked her outfit when she was crying outside and then she went and hung out with Raymond for like a day. It was like green under and like a purple jacket, and I just could not stop thinking about Daphne from
Oh my
Scooby-Doo. I love
Yes,
that.
I was also thinking that. I was like, this is such Daphne.
Like the necktie and everything.
Yeah, it looked so similar.
And then I also really liked her New Year's dress, the silky, fluffy, and she had gloves. I love her gloves all the time. Incredible outfits.
Yeah.
Yes,
All right.
definitely.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.